Warhammer can be a pretty strange hobby, and it's usually made up of 3 different aspects. The game, where the dice gods decide our fun, and we get to show off just how terrible we are at understanding rules. The hobby, where we get to bring our favourite heroes to life and be creative. Personally, this is my favourite part. And the lore. Shadrake quivered as his cannon exploded into her love purse. What? When it comes to mythical creatures, I'm pretty sure everybody loves a dragon. So when the new Cryptborn Stormwing box came out, I went looking for inspiration. We have a lot of dragons in pop culture that we can use for references. Shenron from Dragon Ball Z, Draco from Dragonheart, Dragon from Shrek, and my mother-in-law. But being the age I am, there was only one dragon that really stuck out. Blue Eyes White Dragon. But as I started around looking at reference photo, it was pretty underwhelming. It really is just the whole thing of contrast. There's not a lot of color in it. Wouldn't translate too well to miniature painting. But it did give me the idea of an iridescent organic chrome. Welcome back, heretics, and as is tradition, every time I press record, next door decides they're going to mow their lawn. So while my eyes swell shut from hay fever, let's check out how we painted this dragon skin. Shooting some violet through the airbrush. Yes, I know I said airbrush, don't run away because you can do this whole thing with dry brushing. In fact, if you want to see us do it with dry brushing, just comment down below and we'll make another video. Now, this is not a base coat, this is really just to start creating some interesting shadows, and I'm going to push some saturation by shooting some blue on top of it as well, but just very splotchy. Here and there, we want that organic feel. Next up on the paint train is blue-green. Now, we're just going to shoot this closer to like one side of the fold. We're essentially making 2 different shadow colors. So we've got the purple, which is going to be our deepest, darkest shadow, and then we're going to come in with this blue-green. Pick a side, but be a little bit more mindful where we're shooting it to leave some of the purple in those recesses. I'm also going to be shooting this from a few different angles, and that'll make a little bit more sense when we jump over to the next color. Now, don't forget we're doing the wings and the skin around here, so make sure you get a couple of shots everywhere. Coming in with a little pale grey blue, we're going to start focusing on the center of the folds, the highest points where we want our light, where we really want it to start looking like it's going shiny. So going straight down Main Street of all those big folds is really what's going to make that pop. But again, we want to leave a lot of that green, blue, and purple in the recesses. We don't want all that work to go to nothing. Now, I realize this is looking a little bit patchy, but that's actually what we want. We want those inconsistencies, because if you look at skin and how it reacts, there are so many different colors and shades and values in there. It's the blends, it's the smoothing of transitions between all those colors that actually give it that natural feel. The other thing I'm doing here is coming over with a little bit of a Zenithal with this to really give it a really light white skin. And now we're really going to ramp it up. We're going to put some white, but we're really focusing on the highest points of the folds and where the most intense light is going to be. Remember, we're looking for somewhat of a chrome effect, which means we have to have some crazy value jumps. As you can see, I'm getting nice and close with the airbrush and just really following those folds. If you're doing this with the dry brush, nice light passes so you leave all of those recessed shades in there would probably be the best way to go about this. After this step, we can pack away the airbrush and pull out a traditional brush because we're going in with some glazes. Now, don't be scared of glazes. It just means it's really super thin. All I'm doing here is putting extra water into the paint. Now, this is the same violet from before that we started off setting shadows with the airbrush. And this is partially why we set those values, because it makes it a whole lot easier for us to follow now. Running this super thin violet into the recesses creates a shadowed line, essentially. And what we're going to do from there is we're going to wick off the brush. Yes, I'm a brush licker. And then we're going to feather out that transition. Before we jump back into the painting, what has 2 thumbs and would love you to like and subscribe? This guy. After we've done all the deepest, darkest shadows, we're going to add a little bit more water and pick out some of the recesses that aren't quite as deep. All we're really looking to do here is tint. Tinting and then following those recesses is really going to start to bring out a value and start adding some shape to the model. While we are focusing a lot on the wings, we're also not forgetting the rest of the model. Every step that we do to a wing, we're essentially going to do in the exact same way, albeit different shapes for different muscle groups. Now that we've knocked out that purple, we're going to bring in blue-green and do the exact same thing, but where all the green was. And this is the thing, this is why we set the values with the airbrush, to make it a whole lot easier to pick where all of these things are going to sit. Blue-green is a lot stronger of a pigment, especially in the paint that I'm using, which is the blue-green from Vallejo Model Color. Now, I had to put a little bit more water than I usually would in a glaze, because otherwise it's just too damn strong. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can think about this. One, a reflection. You have a shadow, you have a reflection. And yeah, no, that's pretty easy. The other way is to think of two shadows. You have one shadow coming from one side, one shadow coming from the other, and they're different colors. To me, that's probably the simplest way to go about something like this, because if you start overthinking a lot of these details and a lot of the processes, as well as a lot of the placement, you're going to confuse yourself pretty damn quick. For the most part, we've kept these colors pretty separate, but don't be afraid to blend the green into the purple and vice versa. This is just going to create more interest, more shape, and more dynamic in the model. Once we finish up with our green blue, it's going to look awesome, but a little bit cold. We want some life and some warmth in there. So we're going to take a little bit of ice yellow, draw a very thin line, wick off the end of the brush and start feathering that out. Now, value not only comes from light and dark, but you can go from cold to warm as well. And this can really start to add some interest and some life into all of your painting. This is something you don't want to go too crazy on. All I'm doing is focusing on some of the most raised parts of the fold, so where the light would be the most intense. And it's actually giving us a very luminescent feeling. It looks like a glow or a gleam or a shine, instead of just getting lighter. After picking out all those folds, we're also going to go back to those muscle groupings on the dragon itself. And same thing, this is what's going to really start to pop it out. Look at all the shape and the value and the interest that we have there. Keep in mind, this is very thin. It will dry lighter than what we're painting it on. Now, if you wanted to go crazy, you could go and highlight every single wrinkle and scale in here. And yes, it would add a lot to the model. You might also drive yourself insane though. Now that we've finished our highest highlights, I'm going to push some deep sea blue into the deepest, darkest recesses. Now, granted, not all of them. I'm focusing a little bit more towards the body, and then whatever the little phalange things are on the wings to kind of blackline it all. But this is going to give us some really interesting depth. This is also what's going to create a lot of more dynamics in our shapes. Using the same ideas and techniques, we're just going to be glazing. That's all we're doing. And you can see as we're doing here, kind of on the wing shoulder thing, whatever that's called, we're just creating that deep, dark, round feeling, and I think we do it pretty easily. I'm also going to come in between some of these scales and really define those heavy lines and get some detailed separation. And after this is done, we're up to the good part. As always, a massive thank you to everybody supporting the channel, and especially our prismatic heretics over on Patreon. We love you all, and we'll see you next Tuesday.